Greetings, Shea Lapiani. Pray that all that are experiencing and watching this video are at peace and are peace at this time. That is what Shea Lapiani means. Are you peace? And the answer to that invocation is Alafiani. I am peace, or peace only. So pray that all are at our peace at this time. And this video I'm going to use to introduce everyone who may not be familiar to my book, my first book, and this is Ona Agbani, The Ancient Path. You can get it at my website, www.oshetorainstitute.com. I will flash it here on the screen for you and also put it at the end of the video. But I just wanted to give some of the highlights of the book so that those who were interested would know what it was about. Should they like to order it or should they like to get it for themselves or for someone else. I used it to teach an African spirituality class when I was teaching at Middle Tennessee State University. So it's good for that. It is an introductory book to the African spiritual practice of the Anago people. The Anago people are known as Yoruba here in the West, and now that's even what they're called in Africa, but originally they referred to themselves as Anago. And so these are the spiritual practices of those people. The currently called Yoruba people, this is an introduction to their spiritual practices. The reason that I wrote the book was because when I told my family that I was going to adopt African spirituality as my lifestyle, I met with a lot of reactions, negative reactions, based upon the fear that they had been taught to have of African spiritual traditions. And this was a fear of the negative power of our traditions, which exists. Any tradition has a negative powers. But this is the only part of the tradition that has been shown since we have been brought into the Ma'afa. And this makes sense on the part of the colonizer because we use the tradition to catch cane fields on fire and to set plantation homes on fire and to set cotton fields on fire and to free ourselves. Study the history of Haiti and how our ancestors there became free. Haiti was the second democratic country in this Western hemisphere. The first was Palmares in Brazil. And study the history of those two places and how they became free. They used this tradition in order to free themselves. So it is the tradition of our African ancestors. And this is what makes it liberating to us. It is not the tradition of an oppressor. It is not a tradition put upon us in order to keep us enslaved mentally or physically. So this tradition is fearful to the oppressor. So they taught us to fear it as well. So that now in these modern times, we're walking around just as fearful of it as the oppressors are. So we have assimilated ourselves so deeply into their society that we now take on their role and fear our own traditions. So with that being said, when I explained to my family that this was the tradition that I was going to practice and raise my children in, they were extremely angry. They were extremely worried and felt as though I was endangering the souls of myself and my children. And I tried to explain to them what the tradition was about and where it came from so that they would no longer have these fear-based opinions of African tradition. Because for an African person to look up on their own tradition and the traditions of their ancestors as something negative, as something bad, that speaks to a deep level of self-hatred. So I tried to explain it to them so that they could let go of this self-hatred. And on some fronts, I was successful. On others, I was not. So at that point, I began to write this book. And it took me 10 years to write it because, I was having babies. I was homeschooling. I was married at the time. So definitely, being a caretaker and a loving, nurturing wife to my husband at the time. So I was doing all of those things. Also, of course, still in school, always working too. So just living life caused it to take 10 years to write. And but when it was finally finished, it was joyous. But I took all of that time to write it, and what it is an introductory book to the tradition so that for those of us who are practicing the tradition and feel the need to explain it to our families, to give them the historical background, to give them the spiritual background, to give them a foundation, a basis for understanding what we're doing, so that we'll, first of all, have the information we need to do that. And second of all of those who practice the tradition, whether you call it Yoruba, whether you call it Orisha worship, whether you call it Ifa, whether you call it Voodoo, Hoodoo, all of those names that we know it as, all of those who practice it need to have the historical background on it, need to have the spiritual background on it. You need to understand the origins of it. So that is the purpose of the book as well. It's so that we'll have the information to explain it to others, but so that we will also be grounded and based in information. I believe in arming myself, my children, and those people that I teach with information. You have to be armed with information so that if someone if someone approaches you with a point, or if someone approaches you with a question, that you will be able to have the information that you need to address that point or to address that question, that you don't have to walk around feeling as though you are, left without any sort of recourse. I hate feeling that way. So I constantly arm myself with information about those things that I participate in and those things that I'm interested in. So this book is my contribution to you being able to do the same. So I'm just going to read a passage just so you have an idea as the kind of information that's been given. This is from chapter 1, and this is just giving you an explanation as to what Ifa is. What is the tradition? What is the spiritual tradition? What is Orisha worship? What is Yoruba? And according to the Holy Odu Oshetura, Ifa asks what is truth. I ask what is truth. Truth is the wisdom of Olodumare guiding the universe. Olodumare is the ultimate reality, the supreme being. Ifa is a West African spiritual system practiced primarily by a people the ancients called Anago. The Anago are a Yoruba-speaking people of southwest Nigeria. Within West Africa, each ethnic group, derogatorily called tribes, has a spiritual system peculiar to its own conditions and ecosystem. Even though West Africa is vast and ecosystems vary greatly from place to place, these spiritual systems are similar and interrelated, interdependent, and interconnected, just as the ethnic groups themselves are. Some of the other spiritual systems include the Vodun of Dahomey, which is now called Benin, the Abasam of the Akan, the Nkisi of the Bakongo. All of these are some of our related spiritual systems. Ifa, commonly known simply as Yoruba here in the West, and its spiritual siblings from neighboring cultures have many bicultural offsprings as a result of the Ma'afa. The Ma'afa being the great tragedy that African people underwent with the colonization of Africa and some of us being taken into captivity here in the West. Some of the more well-known and often misrepresented progeny are Santeria, Leukemia, Voodoo, Obia, Hoodoo, Conjure, root working, and to a much lesser degree, the Black Church. These offspring represent the mixture of African culture with Native American culture with elements of Eurocentric Christianity thrown in. Our enslaved ancestors used these spiritual systems to protect themselves and their families during captivity. Therefore, hoodoo, voodoo, root working, and any other practice that contained African spiritual elements were deemed wicked and evil by slave masters. So, this is just one of the passages from the book where I begin to explain what Ifa is, why we've come to look at it the way that we do as African people, and why it has gotten to a certain degree a bad rap. Not only here in America, when I was in Nigeria, I watched a lot of Nigerian films from the Nollywood sector, and a lot of them also portray the traditions of our ancestors in a very negative light. This is giving us the reasons why. My book gives you some of the reasons why. Now, that's just the first chapter explaining to you what Ifa is. I go ahead and I explain who the Orisha are. I explain what a divination is, what a reading is. I explain what your purpose is in this life and how to know that. I explain the Orisha that you should begin to pray to first when you begin to practice the tradition. What are the Orisha that you should pray to first? I explain the role of women in Ifa, in the tradition of our ancestors. And then I go on to explain once you know your purpose in life, how do you go about fulfilling that destiny? So that is all in this book on the Agbani. I recently lowered the price. I decreased the price to take into consideration the recession that we're all going through and dealing with. So it was originally $30 and now it is $20. It is available on my website, www.oshetourainstitute.com. Those of you who have it and who have read it, please leave comments concerning the book so that others can get some more information from the book. Those of you who don't have it, please get a copy. I promise you that it will be uplifting and it will assist you in fulfilling your destiny. The beautiful picture on the front is of an ancient path in Barbados. This is Welchman's Gully in Barbados, one of the most beautiful places in the world. But please pick the book up, ask questions in the comments, let me know what you want to know, what other questions you have about the book. I will be more than happy to address those for you. Peace and blessings and love, ecstasy, abundance, and bliss, and all of the blessings of Oshun to all of those who are sending positivity out into the universe. Ashe, Hatupwe.